First, I would like to extend my appreciation to our Indigenous cousins of Turtle Island for your continued generosity with hosting settlers like me on your homeland. Know that I am in solidarity with you in your fight for land and food sovereignty. Again, welcome. We are grateful for your interest in this groundbreaking work of the African Canadian Farmers Fund, which is part of the Inclusive Prosperity Project, a partnership between the Fair Finance Fund, SETC, and the Learning Enrichment Foundation. The Inclusive Prosperity Project stems from the 2021 report by the Fair Finance Fund, spotlighting the historical discrimination, land loss, and racist institutional barriers experienced most often by African Canadians and Indigenous peoples, which directly impede our ability to access and retain farmland on par with other Caucasian Canadians, This has blocked skilled Indigenous and African Canadian farmers from securing land access that is needed to invest in long-term infrastructure, soil health, and strong local economies. Indigenous peoples and African Canadians are further burdened by government policies. For example, provinces such as Ontario, Quebec, and BC, where mandatory farm plot sale sizes aim to regulate agricultural land against urbanization, instead are a barrier to Indigenous and African Canadian small-scale farmers. We will examine the crucial issues and outline the African Canadian Farmers Fund's efforts to promote equity and justice within the agricultural sector for African Canadians, while also supporting the transformation in agriculture as traditional export-oriented, commodity-based agriculture fails to appeal to the next generation of farmers. Please join me in welcoming our first panelist. Let's welcome Elder Calvin Gore. Has Calvin joined us as yet? Elder Calvin? Nope. Okay, we will move on to, Karen Farron. Karen is co-owner of a 137-acre farm called Farron Family Farms in Long Settlement, New Brunswick, which specializes in pasture-raised meats, including a range of agricultural meats, such as goat and lamb. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And just want to let you know, we are incredibly proud to be here. And I am the co-owner of Farron Family Farms with my husband. We're first-generation Black farmers. My journey into agriculture has been defined by determination and resilience. While I didn't have a farming background growing up, our deep-rooted desire to contribute to sustainable food production and sovereignty led us to pursue this path. Farron Family Farms is more than just a business. It's a legacy that we're building for our future generations. It's a testament to the boundless potential within diverse communities to strive in agricultural sector. Through relentless hard work, we're cultivating a thriving farm that not only yields quality crops, but livestock, and also serve as a hub for community engagement and education. I am truly honored to be a part of this panel today, where I'll have the opportunity to share insights from our own journey and contribute to the important dialogue on the future of farming and diversity in agriculture. Together, I believe firmly we can pave the way for more inclusive and resilient landscape. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Karen, for joining our panel. Next, I will introduce Nicole Broussari. Nicole is Vice President of Pamoja Community Investment Fund, a cooperative farm in Kawartha Lakes, Ontario. She's a passionate advocate for social change and education, dedicated to creating opportunities and generational wealth for her community. We're excited to hear from you, Nicole.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am the Vice President of Pamoja Farms, a Vice President of also a PCIF DC, that's Pamoja Community Investment Fund Development Cooperative. We are a group of around 40 now members who have started a cooperative farm in Pamoja Farms. And our goal really, as Afua said, is to extend and to build a legacy, not just in farming, but in financial empowerment, in food security for the Black community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nicole. As we wait for our other panelists to arrive or to join us, is Core here as yet?
Yes, I am.
Welcome, Brother Core.
Thank you.
Core is a co-founder of Afro Van Connect, a not-for-profit organization devoted to empowering African Canadians through performance, collaboration, dialogue, and creativity. Core also leads the Fair Farm initiative in Metro Vancouver, focusing on Afro-Indigenous food sovereignty. Welcome, Core.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here and to meet everyone here. The Fair Farms Initiative is an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm committed to food justice, sovereignty, and sustainable land practices. Fair Farm Garden was founded in 2020 as a safe space for African descent and BIPOC youth to gather during the pandemic. We focus on supporting people in the margins who have limited access to space and opportunities to grow food. Our initial intention was to gather with the goals of growing culturally relevant foods and hybridizing seeds offered to our community. And we're really happy to be here and to continue doing the work in Metro Vancouver. Thank you, Flor.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and start. Elder Calvin Gore will be joining us shortly, but we will go ahead. Barriers to land ownership for African Canadians has been since the settling of African Americans planters in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Eastern Township of Quebec, starting in the 1760s, followed by an influx of 2,000 African American refugees being settled in Halifax after the War of 1812, followed by an exodus of African Americans from Oklahoma, taking root in the prairies and British Columbia between 1896 and 1911 as agricultural immigrants. African Canadians began owning land through limited land grants based on warrants or what was called licenses of occupation, and eventually with full title deeds many years later. But gentrification, imbued by racism against African Canadian communities across Canada, most notably seen in Africville in Halifax, Hogan's Alley in Vancouver, and Little Burgundy in Montreal, has since led to African Canadians losing much of their lands. I'm going to go to Core to pose us the question. Could you explore the racial implications of gentrification on African Canadian communities in Vancouver especially concerning how it has impacted African Canadians securing agricultural land?
Thank you for the question, Afua. Currently in Vancouver, we have been displaced due to the gentrification. And as Afua eloquently expressed, we are doing the work actively to try and create spaces. There are a handful of Black farmers and people who are interested in food sovereignty seeking to create spaces for us to gather and to grow food. A lot of these efforts have been done on people's individual behalf. There still hasn't been a collective support from a top down. It's all the work has been grassroots. And it's happening, and I'm very positive and happy that it's happening, and we're looking forward to the future. But the history and the effect has been quite drastic and lingering since these things have since the gentrification and the, I guess, the anti-Blackness and suppression of people of African descent on these lands in BC. It has, the only, as you discussed, Hogan's Alley was probably the main Black settlement within BC. Since the dissolution of that community, the Black community has been kind of spread out everywhere. We do not currently have a clear hub or clear space where we can grow food, and that's something that we're working on. And this really has impacted us greatly because a lot of people within our community who would like to participate do not have the access to or the resources to. So a lot of the work that we're doing is happening in clusters, in small spaces spread out throughout BC. And the accessibility to those spaces, again, for our community is something that is difficult. Not a lot of our community in BC have access to the spaces to grow that are near within them. Vancouver is a very hard place to get access to land because of the price point. So it has driven a lot of people to move further and further out from the Lower Mainland to find access to grow land, which ultimately impedes the purpose of bringing people who are within the general Vancouver area to grow. But we are making strides. So I do want to end on a positive note.
Can you tell us a little about the history of Hogan's Alley and what happened there in Vancouver?
For sure. Hogan's Alley was the largest Black settlement on the West Coast in Vancouver during, I believe, when car culture was becoming a thing. The city decided that, hey, we want to build a highway from the city into the suburbs to support within people who had recently moved out of the city, getting access back into the city for work. Within them thinking of areas in which to start this work, they targeted the only area which people of African descent live, which was Hogan's Alley, as the place where they would build a viaduct or a highway that would connect the city to the suburbs. And by doing that initiative that they planned on, they saw the Black community's area as Blythe, as a space where nothing was growing, as something that was just a dark mark on the city. And so by creating this highway, it would eliminate that and basically raise the value of the city. And so by targeting this area, they basically marginalized a community that was gathering, a vibrant community that had restaurants, that had a community center. There was about Fountainhead Church. There was people coming together within the community to grow and to build. And based upon the projection of the city, they didn't value that. And so they seek to erase that. And by doing that, they basically started building a viaduct, and the viaduct ended up causing the dispersion of that community. It never actually went to full fruition because it basically got protested and was stopped ultimately. But the initial work that was done ended up destroying the community that was there. And I think intentionally that was obviously the purpose, to basically marginalize people of African descent in the West Coast. Currently right now, they are building one of the largest hospitals in BC in that area right now. And so there is a whole entire conversation of a resurgence of looking at the legacy and the history of how could they make right the work that the issues that they have caused to the Black community and basically looking at the history of inequity that has taken place. And so there's a lot of questions about land and accessibility and land trust that has been happening within BC, specifically for the Black community. And we are hoping to extend that conversation to food sovereignty, food security, and access and space to grow. Even though this area, where Hogan's Alley is, was in the downtown core of Vancouver, we're hoping that we can understand that the work that would eventually grow would include food and food sustainability and honoring and supporting our community with culturally relevant food and access to grow and connect people with the land. So these are some of the things that took place and some things that we're focusing on now.
Thank you, Cor. I think that's a piece of history of African Canadian history that many people are not aware of. And I also think quite a number of people who were displaced from Hogan's Alley moved to Montreal or Quebec and began another community called Little Burgundy, which also got gentrification removed. These people from Little Burgundy also. I believe Elder Calvin Gore has joined us. I am going to introduce him. Elder Calvin was raised on a small farm in Preston Township in Nova Scotia and helped start the Preston Farmers Association in 1978 with 37 African Nova Scotian farmers from the Preston region. He has a background in childhood development, education, and is a staunch food sovereignty advocate for African Canadians. Elder Calvin is retired and works part-time with 902 Man Up in Halifax, developing project ideas and writing project proposals for funding. His expertise and experience will today shed light on innovative strategies for addressing systemic inequalities in access to nutritious food. Elder Calvin, welcome.
I'm so sorry that I'm late. I think for me, it's like I really had an opportunity for the first time to think very deeply about what it is that we're doing around food sovereignty in the Black community locally, and it's like I had talked to you some time ago about this whole notion of gentrification. When we talk about it in the Black community, we typically talk about it in an urban setting. We don't usually talk about that in rural Black communities. And so I just wanted to give like the two examples, okay? I lived in North End Halifax about 30 years ago, and it was very different. I mean, the kind of, you really felt culture and you felt the presence of Black people in the community. Things have changed. I mean, there was several Black communities in the Halifax region, right? Africville was just one of those. And some of the other ones were moved. I mean, where the New Horizons church is right now, I can remember, as a child going there and there being all these Black homes and a corner store and stuff like that. None of that exists anymore. Actually, what we have is a situation where we have boutiques, meat shops, pastry shops, coffee shops, and stuff like that. High-rise apartment buildings, and very few Black folks, because most of us can't afford to stay or live there, and have moved away. In the Prestons, and maybe we could talk about that a little bit later when we talk in the second part of a question that I'm going to answer, but I was, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. I was working on this project with the East Preston Daycare. Trina Fraser actually is the executive director there. And I really want to give a shout out to her because I don't think, as much as I had been involved in agriculture and forestry as well, I don't think I really appreciated what was going on in the community. So she called me up, we had a talk, and she asked me if I would make 20 boxes garden boxes and bring them to the daycare because they wanted to have they wanted the kids to have an experience where they could actually grow some food. And I dropped off the boxes, and about a week later, she called me up and she said, "You know those garden boxes that you dropped off? We're going to have a launch in a week, and we'd like for you to come." I don't think it really struck me until I was driving into the daycare center, and I saw these 3-year-old kids with plastic tools, shovels, rakes, hoes, and stuff like that, standing in the dirt in these garden boxes. And I thought, that is the future of the African Nova Scotian community. These are the things that we need to be doing. We need to start really early to introduce our children to those kinds of ideas where self-sufficiency can become an opportunity for them, unlike it has been for us. And I thought, oh my God. And so that has helped to take us into a totally different place. I mean, I think about, the Garden Box Project, right? And maybe, I mean, do I want to get into that right now or a little bit later?
I'll come back to you for that, Brother Kelvin. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And again, many of us do not know the history of Canada's oldest African Canadian community communities in Nova Scotia. I'm going to go to Nicole for our next question. Nicole, as the co-owner of a 100-acre incubator farm in possibly Southern Ontario's premier farming county, please explain what role land ownership plays in fostering economic independence and community development for African Canadian farmers.
So I think for us, one of the of course benefits of having cultural business. For us as Pomoja, one of our business model and the way that our business is structured through the cooperative allows us or affords us the ability to be able to spread the expense of farming and operating an agricultural business across different individuals. And that's what affordable funding means for us. It's enabling us to be able to afford to build, to plant, to grow, to distribute food, So I think that's the benefits definitely of affordable funding.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Karen, in 2021, you, your husband, and 4 children packed up and left Ontario to move to a farm you purchased in Long Settlement because it was the best one you could financially afford. While African Canadians represent the largest group of New Brunswick's racialized population, with a population of 12,100 in 2021, it is still minute in comparison to the over 768,000 African Canadians in Ontario. What difference would it have made to you and your family had the African Canadian Farmers Fund existed in 2021?
Hello. Hi, Calvin. I have to say hi. It's finally good to put a voice to the face. Definitely, if the African Canadian Farmers Fund had existed in 2021, it would have presented a significant opportunity for my family and I to stay put. We have a large family and support by, a community. And we had to make the decision to move to New Brunswick because of the affordability in farmland. We would have definitely, undoubtedly take advantage of the opportunity of such a fund, which could have potentially altered, our move, where there's a larger demographic, as you stated, with African Canadians and other cultural groups. And with that, there would have been a higher demand of our cultural food products, such as the goat meat, which we specialize in. With access to a fund like the African Canadian Farmers Fund, we might have, the market for our products would have been more substantial. It would have alleviated the need to work so hard to find a customer base, where we are locally the only Black farm that exists in our community. And with that said, you can understand and see the challenges with that and getting customers locally. And we know if we were in Ontario, we wouldn't have those struggles. For instance, here, most of our customer base, I would even say 99% of our customer base, are from the surrounding cities. Now, that's just proven that if we were in Ontario, we wouldn't have the challenges that we do. So, which is a main part of our business, is that challenge is to get more and more people aware of our business here in rural New Brunswick. Research indicates that 95% of Black Canadians rely on their own funds to invest in their business venture. And that's us. Like, we are that part of that 95%. Because so with the absence of funding opportunities, we had no other choice but to rely on our own personal investment to achieve our dreams. So I welcome these opportunities, and I look forward to moving ahead. So the potential for other African Canadians and BIPOC groups to have some kind of equitable opportunities to achieve this.
So when you say that you have to work really hard at getting customers for your products, you also grow beef. You also produce beef. Are you not able to sell beef in Long Settlement?
Again,
or chicken and pork?
Again, we're the only Black farmer in our community. With just saying that alone just shows you that it's predominantly white Canadians, and they, to me, they go where and go to who they know. Being racialized and marginalized, it is a difficult uphill battle. So with that, it is a challenge for us. And like I said, 99% of our customers are from within the city. That does not say we don't have white Canadians that shop from us. They do. But the majority of them also are from within the city, not in our local community.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to go back to Elder Calvin with my next question. You have a long history, as you were explaining earlier, with trying to get African Nova Scotians in agriculture or agri-foods industry. Please explain to us the success you've had with this and how the African Canadian Fund could boost your long struggle, or if you've had any success at all.
I just want to back up quickly. I want to talk about that Garden Box project because I think it's really important. It was out of the daycare that the thoughts and the ideas around that developed, because at the daycare, what we have is a number of young children and single parent moms. And we were trying to figure out, well, how do we actually get them involved in gardening and raising their own food? And so the Garden Box project really came out of that thinking. And so we approached the Department of Agriculture, who has agreed. We have a 5-year initiative. And they're going to provide us with some funding around 4,000 garden boxes over a 5-year period in Nova Scotia. And we're actually just waiting right now for the funding to do that. But it is a no-till, no-dig type of situation. We provide the garden boxes in a kit. So you get the garden box itself, you get soil, you get fertilizer, and you get seeds as well. I guess the other part of that is a partnership that we have with Dalhousie University. Their extension services is providing us with a 3-day training workshop where we'll talk about different aspects of gardening. So, and I don't want to go into that too much, but basically to say it's about garden preparation, it's about maintenance, and then it's about harvesting. What are you going to do with that harvest after you have grown it over the extent of that season? So getting back to the question that you just asked, though, acquiring land and it's so interesting because in the Black community, we have rural communities, we have huge tracts of land. And it is so interesting that, and when I say tracts of land, what we have is huge forests, right? And anybody knows who has been farming or anything like that, you can't use the same kind of equipment that you use on a farm to do forestry. You need heavier equipment, which means a forestry tractor, a skidder, a trailer with a grapple, to be able to haul those logs out of the forest. And we're really doing some really interesting things because we have a forestry project that we're trying to develop right now in partnership with Nova Scotia Community College. And what we want to do is we want to train about 8 to 10 people who can go in the forest, harvest that timber, clear some land either for agriculture or for other kinds of things that we would like to do. The other thing is, unfortunately, in the Preston community and some of the others, and I'm thinking specifically along the Eastern Shore in Nova Scotia, Antigonish and Guysborough, huge territory. Many people there in the Prestons don't have clear title to the land. And that also creates a major issue. The provincial and federal government recently invested a fair amount of money into hiring lawyers to assist community residents with acquiring clear title. That becomes an issue for us, I believe, because we know that agricultural land compared to land for residential subdivisions and for commercial purposes, that's quite possible because of the expense around that and the kind of money that can be made. That's quite possibly the direction that they're going to go. They're not going to go into trying to create opportunities for the African Nova Scotia community to be self-sufficient as far as food is concerned, for sure. Where and how could a fund like that help? Oh my God, just thinking about that. The kinds of things that we could do. I mean, we have a young guy right now in the community. His father has 25 acres, and I've been talking to him about putting it. Well, it's impossible to put in a road, so put in a laneway to access that 25 acres. And it may not sound like very much, but the farm that they have right now is about 12 acres of land, and it's very close to a lake. And there have been all kinds of problems around environmental stuff, because the other thing that many people don't know is the Prestons has a huge watershed where the municipality has been expropriating land for the last 50 years, and providing all kinds of restrictions, preventing us from building not just homes, but any kind of livestock facilities and stuff like that. And because sometimes there are certain pesticides that, well, we don't use them as much now, but in the past, we were restricted from growing different kinds of crops and stuff like that on that land, So again, about the fund, and one of the things that I've also recognized is we need to create a situation where much of the work that we do is done in partnerships with other initiatives. And I'm thinking about economic development here in Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, New Brunswick. We have another agency that's called ACOA, Atlantic Cooperation and Opportunities agency. And, I've had some conversations with them, but again, if you don't have access to land, there's no need having those conversations with them, especially if the things that you want to do are, $500,000 or $1.5 million, you don't have land, they really don't want to have that conversation.
Thank you, Brother Calvin. I am going to pose my next question to Core, but as we keep track of time and wanting to allow time for the audience to ask questions, I'm going to please ask panelists to restrict their answers to possibly 1.5 minutes. So, Core, it is crucial for the success of the African Canadian Farmers Fund to have a governance structure that reflects the diversity and experiences of those it aims to serve. Can you explain how such a structure ensures equitable decision-making and effective resource allocation within the agricultural community?
I think that definitely the diversity is key. Just as Calvin was talking about his experiences in Nova Scotia, I think every province has their unique accessibility issues and access to land and what parameters support each community, and taking that into consideration is very important within deciding how we're going to fund and how we're going to support each community. I think something else that was said that was really important is that working with other initiatives across the country, within sharing resources, within sharing information, within sharing accessibility to just awareness, I think is also very vital within creating a structure that will be a governance structure that will honor and support our community as a whole. Finding within my own experience within BC that we talked about with access to land within the core area, as far as Vancouver, it's quite expensive and it can be quite difficult. So access to land within our general area where the majority of people are may not be possible. So having ways in which we could work together with other organizations, or having ways in which we could learn from other provinces or other communities who are more established within awareness is also something that's very important within building the structure. And so I think diversity is key because there's no one way of doing it. And I think that that's something that we know, but our problems are ubiquitous. And I think that within information sessions like this, I think we can generally come together with like some key points that could be utilized to create that structure that will hopefully be flexible enough to honor the diversity that takes place within each province.
Thank you. My next question is to Nicole. Nicole, concessionary capital or capital provided at below market rates and with flexible terms is critical for the success of the African Canadian Farmers Fund. Tell us how access to such capital uniquely enhances the effectiveness and impact of the fund's effort at promoting economic empowerment and equitable opportunities for African Canadian farmers.
Thank you. So in order for anyone to operate a business, funding must be available. We need funding for land, we need funding for seeds, we need funding for equipment, soil, etc. And so having something like the fund enables us to be able to operate, enables us to be able to purchase what we need, perhaps staffing, etc. So it's critical for us to be able to have access to affordable funding on top of that, because many of us, I forgot the sister's name, but she mentioned the fact that a lot of us are doing business, our businesses, our farming businesses with our own funds, right? The funds that we've raised from ourselves, our community, that we've saved over the years. And sometimes it's just not enough. So us being able to access affordable funds without, extremely high interest rates, for example, like the mortgage that we currently have, very high interest rate, Because we're a new business, we had to go with a B lender, and and of course, as you know, the fees and all of that added on to the loan itself is hard for us to carry. So having access to operational funds that are more affordable at lower interest rates or grants, etc., that's what really keeps our businesses afloat. That's what helps us to be able to advance in our businesses as well. So it's critical for us as Black farmers to have access to these funds in order for our businesses to survive and thrive.
Thank you, Nicole. And for our last question, I'm going to go to Karen, as I'm being mindful of time. Karen, how would you explain to us the necessity of sustained support for the African Canadian Farmers Fund, since systemic barriers deeply entrenched in the agricultural sector require long-term strategies rather than short-term interventions to achieve meaningful and lasting change for our people?
From a personal experience, I see where this is a generational issue, problem. Definitely a long-term strategy is needed, is required for any kind of reform and change. Sustainable support for African Canadian farmers is crucial due to the deeply systematic inequities within the agricultural sector. And believe you me, we were very naive when we came into the farm agriculture, that we thought it was a community, well inclusive environment, and we found out it wasn't. So these issues require long-term strategies rather than short-term interventions. It's essential to recognize the need for investment, for active advocacy from from us and others to drive policy reforms, not just locally, but regional and national levels. These reforms should aim to address structural barriers that's perpetuating racial disparities in agriculture and finance. I hear, and I heard Nicole said it and I said it, that we had to invest our own funds, in order to create what we, our goal, our dream. And then when I hear our other counterparts, other Canadians that are either generational farmers or, white farmers, it's two separate stories, sometimes I get tired of even talking about my challenges because of the fact that it is so deeply systematic. So we need to advocate for equitable access to resources, fair lending practices, anti-discrimination policies. Implementing such reforms can create more equitable and supportive environment for African Canadian farmers, and ultimately lead into the advancement of in the agricultural sector, and to feel that we belong in this sector, because I'm telling you, when we first came and the challenges we face, you don't feel like you belong here. And I never thought that when we initially came. So it's a rooted systematic problem.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you to the panelists. I am going, please send your questions through chat. We have a few minutes. I apologize. We have a few minutes for questions. Please raise your hand, or put your questions in the chat, and either me or Rebecca will call on you for your questions, if any. Can you say more about the timing of the African Canadian Farmers Fund? We are hoping to raise at least $1.25 million by the fall to open applications for for loans, but also that would allow us to purchase a piece of land in Toronto. It's actually Toronto's oldest agricultural land or oldest farm. We are hoping to be able to purchase that on behalf of our client by the fall time. So yes, by the fall time, we are hoping to open applications for loans. Next question is, will funds be available soon, and where will they be coming from? Grants, loans? Again, as I just said, we are hoping investments will be coming in by the fall time. And based on the history and the hard work of the Fair Finance Fund, particularly the work of Sally Miller, my apologies, Sally. For the past, from 2019, Fair Finance Fund has been able to raise over $4 million to help racialized, indigenous, and racialized and indigenous people in agriculture and agri-food sector. So based on our experience, our knowledge of the field, along with this new, well, it's not necessarily new, but when Sally started with Fair Finance in 2019, it was definitely new. But this move towards impact investment for social and environmental good, we have no doubt by the fall time, we will be able to raise the 1.25 million needed to establish the fund. Is there a limit on number of applicants? Absolutely not. There will be a review process. It is not to say that all applicants will be accepted. There will be a process for application. And again, you must live in Canada and identify as a person of African descent with other criteria, but primarily, and also having experience in farming. Many people look at growing food as a hobby until they really undertake it as a livelihood. And that's when they realize it's not just a hobby. So you need to come with experience in farming along with your application. Sorry, there's a question. So the Fair Finance Fund is limited to Ontario residents, but the African Canadian Fund is a national fund. It's opened to African Canadians across the country. As I mentioned earlier.
Yes, I had a question.
Yeah.
Afua, thanks for your time. My name is Shah Mahyuddin. I am a gardener. So I have also in the set box, I have mentioned that how we can get the funding. Do you have any idea about funding for community garden or only the African Canadian farming?
No, actually, the Inclusive Prosperity Project, which the African Canadian Farmers Fund is part of, also is hosting an urban agriculture fund, which is called the Nourish Fund. And that is geared to urban growing along with agri-food processing. We are going to, closer to the summertime, or if you keep abreast of our website or webpage on the Inclusive Prosperity webpage, we will put out a call for that particular fund. And that's the Urban Growers Fund.
So that fund will be for all or the only African community?
Sorry, can you refer?
No. That funding, as you were telling to look in the website, that is for the African community or all the communities?
No, the Urban Growers Fund is specifically for indigenous and racialized communities, including South Asian, if you are, not just African Canadians.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Afua. Thanks for your clarification.
And the website, our website is in the chat. So we have 3 minutes left. Let me just say thank you very much for all of you who registered and participated in this webinar. We are looking forward to you to take the word out about this fund, whether it is to investors, whether it is to community members who you hear, like Karen and Elder Calvin, who has been struggling to get, into agriculture. So Karen tells you how difficult it was for her and her family to have to move all the way to New Brunswick to farm, simply because that's where the land was the cheapest, or you are hearing the story of Elder Calvin, who's saying there's a family with 25 acres of land. They cannot use it because they require equipment to be able to cut the trees and to make the land economically viable. So please spread the word. And again, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Keep abreast of developments on our website, and the website is posted in our chat. And any questions, please reach out to me, Afua, at the Fair Finance Fund. And if you have any more questions, we have 2 more minutes. Feel free to post that in the chat. And let me say thank you so much to our panelists. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing some, I'm quite sure, deeply painful and emotional experiences you've had trying to be a farmer in Canada. And you belong here. Many of you are born here. Elder Calvin, your family goes back generations in Nova Scotia. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you, CORE, expressing what is happening in Vancouver and the challenges that African Canadians are facing. And we are hoping that this webinar opens a dialogue nationally, so Ministry of Agriculture can hear, lending institutions can hear us when we say they need to remove the barriers and work harder at trying to make us belong as we do in Canada. Again, thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.